So firstly, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Committee meeting of 10th of March. Could I ask, please, that all participants, both committee members and members of the public who may be attending to speak, please have their microphones off and their cameras off until you're speaking, and obviously then please turn those on when it's your turn to be heard from. Reduced bandwidth means that the call is more likely, this video conference is more likely to succeed rather than to drop out. So thank you for your cooperation on that. Firstly, if I could just go through a few routine matters. Tonight's meeting, as you see, we're using Teams video conferencing, and it is also live streamed simultaneously to YouTube. The Planning Committee tonight, as it has for the last year, consists of 11 elected members, borough councillors, and we're supported tonight by a variety of professional officers. And if I could just introduce some of those, we have Neil Allen, who is our legal representative and one of the barrister, who is here to give us any legal advice on planning matters should it be required. Callum Wernham, who is the Democratic Services Officer and is clerk to this meeting. Chris Bowring, who is the Vice Chairman, Councillor Chris Bowring, who is the Vice Chairman of the meeting. Myself, I'm Simon Weeks, I chair the meeting. Justin Turvey, who's the Planning Team Manager. And who have we got from Highways? Is it, and who have we got tonight? I can't see.
It's Roger, Chairman.
Roger John. Okay, good evening, Roger. I think that's the key people. And then the applications tonight will be presented by the planning officers who've been working on these applications, and that will be Simon Taylor, Mark Croucher and Natalie Jarman. The 11 borough councillors on the committee include representatives from all 4 political groups on the borough council. The procedure tonight is, please take note of this if you haven't participated in the planning committee before, but the borough council planning committee is quasi-judicial and it has formal set procedures and conduct. Firstly, the planning officers will present each application. I will then call in turn only those who have pre-registered to speak. As you will be aware, you have a time limit of 3 minutes for each category of speakers, and that time will be enforced. So in the case where 2 people are sharing the 3 minutes, if the first person takes 2 minutes, 50 seconds, the other person, I'm afraid, has only got 10 seconds to get their points across. As I always mention, members of the committee are interested in the quality of what you have to say rather than the quantity. So please don't feel obliged to use all of your 3 minutes if you can get your key points across more briefly. Nobody else, borough councillors, town councillors, parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors or supporters are permitted to address the committee, ask questions or interrupt or disrupt the meeting. So for the smooth running of the meeting, I would ask that you follow those guidelines, please. Following the planning officer's presentation and the comments of registered speakers, the planning committee members will consider, question, seek further information or clarification on each application and hopefully reach a decision. And that decision may support the officer's recommendation. Occasionally it doesn't support the officer's recommendation and the planning committee has an alternative view. Finally, a reminder that our role tonight is to determine valid planning applications using prevailing local and national planning law and any previous binding decisions put upon us by the planning inspectorate. Our role as a planning committee is not to suggest alterations to schemes, whether they're a good idea, whether they're needed, whether they're too costly, whether there are alternative uses, whether there are more suitable sites elsewhere. We're here tonight to determine those applications that are put in front of us as they stand. So without further ado, thank you for bearing with me on that, and we'll move straight on to the agenda itself. And do we have any formal apologies, Callum?
No, Chairman. And can I just quickly ask through you that Mr. Marsh, can you just turn your camera off for me if you click the little camera button at the top? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay. Do we have, well, first, minutes of the last meeting, members, you've all had those circulated, and of course there's a copy in the agenda in front of you. Are there any alterations, corrections or errors that anybody wishes to get imposed upon those before we put them aside for eventual signature when we're allowed to do so in person? I see nobody indicating. So those minutes will be signed in due course when the rule
Sorry,
allows
Simon.
Sorry?
I was on mute when I was trying to say, on the previous minutes, I have a couple of minor corrections on page 10.
Right.
On the same paragraph. In the paragraph near the bottom, it says, Richard queried whether the units would have flat roofs. I knew they had flat roofs because I've seen the design and everything. What I said was more like a rhetorical question. They have flat roofs, don't they? And that will mean that the buildings don't look quite as tall as some of the objectors felt. You know, everything was a single story around there, and the new buildings were going to be 2-story. They would be high. And the point I was making is that because they have flat roofs, the impression would be less. It would diminish the impact.
To put that in brief summary, then, would you be happy if the wording was changed to say Malcolm Richards acknowledged that the units would have flat roofs and the rest of it remains the same?
Well, no, and that it minimised the height. That's the point I wanted to make. It has flat roofs, so it minimises the height.
Okay. Callum, would you be able to make a minor alteration there, please?
Of course, Chairman.
And the second part of the same sentence is that the proposed spaces would be used for disabled. It's proposed parking spaces, car park spaces.
Okay, understood.
That's all. That's it.
Again, Callum, those are minor changes. Could you please make those ready for final sign-off? Okay. Anybody else with any other queries on the minutes? Right. In that case, we'll move on. Do we have any declarations of interest on any of these applications, the 4 applications in front of us tonight?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's Andrew here. I declare an interest in agenda item 65, application 203514, 34 Hilltop Road. I am a member of the Early Town Council Planning Committee that made a recommendation regarding this application, which in this instance has led me to form a particular view. I shall not, therefore, be taking part in discussion on this application tonight.
Okay, so you won't be involved in the debate or the decision making?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for clarifying that. Any other points from anybody? And right, Justin, can you confirm, or Callum, either of you confirm there are no items to be withdrawn?
No, that's correct, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. So we now move on to page 15 of the agenda, which is an application by Wangels College for an all-weather synthetic pitch, floodlighting and other work. So if I could hand straight over to Simon Taylor to take us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies. Application 203456 is an application for a 100 metre by 60 metre synthetic 3G sports pitch for use for football. In a full-size configuration, it would be 11-a-side football or fewer with alternative configurations. The application is not a Woking Borough Council application. The proposal also includes 6 by 15 metre high floodlights. You can see them in this plan here. Right. 2.5 metre bund to its eastern end, 4.5 metre high fencing around the perimeter of the court, pathways leading from the school grounds and car park and change rooms to the pitch, and a storage shed in the spectator area. Also proposed is construction access separate from the existing access to the school via Wangels Road, in an area of the Wangels Road where there's limited tree coverage and an existing parking area. That's temporary only for construction, will be removed at the end of the construction period. As a condition of the funding that they're receiving from the Football Federation, the proposal is to use it for community use up to, including 10 p.m. Monday to Friday and 9 p.m. on Saturdays and 6 p.m. on Sundays. As some background, you refer to this plan here. The 2017 application was forwarded to the Planning Committee for a similar proposal for 100 metres by 60 metres in an area adjacent to the school grounds, just south of the existing access and west of an existing undersized pitch that was approved in 2016. The applicant has advised that they're no longer willing to proceed with that application. It expires in April of this year, and that is because, in their view, was because of neighbour concerns from residents to the west, and because of negotiations that were held with the Football Association in terms of a better outcome in the current proposal. The application is in the countryside, the boundary being the school grounds within the settlement boundary and the countryside to the north. You'll note Sonning Golf Club to the north, the railway line running through to the north of the site. There are some existing residential dwellings within the countryside to the east, and the settlement boundary to the west is established development within Woodley itself. The primary issues arising from this scheme are the impact of light spill and noise disturbance, primarily to these properties here. 2 objections received from the 2 closest properties to the development here. Parish Council, Charville to the east of Wangels Road and Woodley to the west of Wangels Road, both objected. The issues also include ecology issues. There's a woodland to the south of the site, ancient woodland, sorry. And there's a local wildlife site as well. The ecology issues with bats travelling through the site during their activity months, during the summer months between May and September and October. Drainage was also raised as a concern through this in terms of its impact on Wangels Road. Traffic impacts and the character of the development within the countryside and its impact from Wangels Road. Addressing them in turn, light spill, an application was supported by a light spill plan which indicates the blue lines around the edge of this plan here do show the extent of the light spillage from the pitch. The posts are 50 metres high to minimise any light spillage. You'll note that the boundary of the outermost boundary is what's considered to be the acceptable level of light spillage up to 11 p.m. This application is to 10 p.m. So there's no impact on immediate residential neighbours in terms of light spill. It will be visible in the countryside, but the impact of that is considered to be acceptable. The noise assessment was submitted with the application to look at the impact on neighbouring properties. That also found that there was no discernible impact against the existing noise levels. The primary issue here being traffic along Wangels Road and regular train movements along the 4 lines of the western line of the train line. Ecology issues, you'll note in condition 14 there is a reduction in the hours of use. That is intended to minimise any harm to bats as they move through the site. Traditionally 30 minutes after sunset, so that is intended to address to the best of it can in terms of impact upon the movements there when sunset is borderline at the closing period of about 9:15. Drainage is of no concern to the drainage officer. They have reviewed the proposal. It does include a drainage system whereby it'll be a controlled outlet onto Wangels Road, so the impact is no greater than the existing greenfield rate, and so no issue was raised there. Traffic, there is an existing car park of 178 car parking spaces, so after our use would not be concerned in that area. The highways officer raises no concern. In terms of impact upon the character of the area, these photos do show the level of winter coverage of vegetation along Wangels Road, or I should say March, so early spring. So there will be a degree of visibility in the pitch from Wangels Road, but in the context of the surrounding area, the railway gantries, the trees and the school buildings, it does not raise concern. I draw your attention to conditions. There are conditions for tree protection. Moving back to the entrance here, so there are 2 trees being removed. There's also a condition requiring their replacement, either on the site in that area or elsewhere on the site. The council's ecology officer has also asked for wildflower and grassland treatments to the bund, and they will be pre-commencement conditions. There's also a requirement of noise management plan and a code of conduct. The noise management plan does include a noise monitoring supervisor, which will deal with any issues on the night, and a code of conduct with any future operation of teams utilising the facility. Sport England have imposed 2 conditions: a community use agreement and maintenance plan. I've previously noted the hours have been reduced to 9:15 p.m. weekdays and 7 p.m. on Sundays. That is intended to give 85 hours of usage across the week, which is a condition of the funding of the Football Federation. Subject to these conditions, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Simon, for the presentation. Members, you will have seen in your members' update that there's a number of photographs of the site which are been replicated in Simon's presentation. Because obviously at the moment it's not possible for us to have accompanied site visits under the current travel and COVID regulations. So those photographs may help you have a better understanding of the site, its relationship to the school, the existing pitches and overhead lighting and the adjacent railway line, and of course the houses to the northwest. Right, so if we now come on to the registered speakers, firstly, could I call Keith Baker, who's speaking tonight on behalf of Woodley Town Council. Good evening, Keith.
Good evening, Chairman. Thank you. Can I first say that having 24 hours notice of this application coming to the Planning Committee does not give any potential speakers any time to compose what they have to say. That is the reason why there are no residents here, because we couldn't manage in 24 hours to get them here. Furthermore, neither Alison nor I, Alison Swaddle, who's speaking after me, as the Borough Councillors for Coronation, where Wangels College sits, have had no notification about this application coming to the Planning Committee. Luckily, the Town Council did receive a notification around lunchtime yesterday, and they got in touch with both of us. I find this lack of notification totally unacceptable, almost undemocratic in nature due to the lack of time to prepare our case and represent our residents to the best of our abilities. So please be aware that I do support any additional sporting facilities provided for our children, as I believe it contributes significantly to the health of each and every one of them. However, on behalf of the Town Council, I cannot support this application. First of all, it is actually removing one football pitch, changing the provision from 3 grass pitches to 1 grass pitch and 1 3G pitch. In fact, to squeeze in this 3G pitch, they had no option but to remove the 2 grass pitches. This is a reduction in facilities for the children in the school. It is clear based on the opening times of this proposed 3G pitch, and we've heard about it, that it is a commercial venture available to all who might want to use it. There are concerns from local residents about this exacerbating the flooding issues which occur on Wangels Road. And without any mitigating factors, this will make matters worse, but I was pleased to hear the comments from the planning officer. This issue may well have been covered in the nearly 200 pages of documents, but I stress, with only 24 hours notice, it has not been possible to check this, but it's good to hear the news. My final point is around the impact of extra traffic on Wangels Road. It's not a matter of the car park, it's the matter actually the traffic on the road. Residents have already reported that this road has difficulty in coping with existing traffic flows. It's a small road blighted with speeding. As the 3G pitch will be a commercial venture open until 10 p.m, although now corrected to 9:15 p.m. on weekdays, there will be extra traffic on this road due to hirers driving there. Whilst any traffic flow coming from the Woodley end only has a short distance to get to the main entrance of the school, the traffic flow from the Charvel direction will be almost the full length of Wangels Road to travel before getting to that main entrance. For these reasons, the Town Council would like you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Keith. If we could now come on to Alison Swaddle, speaking as Wokingham Borough Council ward member for this location. Good evening, Alison.
Thank you, Councillor Wiggs. I have to begin with agreeing with Keith that this lack of notice is not acceptable. And I'd like to thank Woodley Town Council officers for being very alert. Now, Keith pointed out the problems about flooding, which I completely agree with. And he also spoke about the additional traffic on the road. And I would remind members that it was only at your last meeting that you had another application exactly opposite here on the other side of the road of a scout centre. Also, people coming up and down that road additionally in the evenings and at weekends. I would like to highlight the having 15-metre floodlighters and a 5-metre high wire fence and the impact on birds, roosting birds and on bats. The officer gave verbal assurance that this will be fine for bats and birds, but I could not find online anywhere a report, a bat survey, and that's something that I know residents in that area, they have to have a bat survey carried out if they want to have any planning development. And there was no mention in the site investigation report about the ecology, about the impact on birds. So no, I cannot support this application, much as I think it's fantastic to have top class sports pitches. There are too many other issues surrounding this application, so I would ask you not to approve it tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. So that concludes those registered to speak. So we'll now throw this open to members of the committee to debate.
Chairman?
Yes?
Can I just ask Brenda Cutler, would you be able to just turn your camera off, please? If you press the little, it's like a camera recorder button at the top of your Teams. Thank you.
Okay, we'll carry on while that happens. So I think probably it would be useful if we could just get absolute clarification as a result of some of the comments just made by the council. Firstly is that whilst the application is to operate till 10 p.m, can we just confirm categorically that as detailed in the conditions, that has been modified to 9:15 in the evening? Is that correct?
That is correct. Under negotiation with the applicant, yes. 9:15 Monday to Saturday and 7 p.m. on Sundays. I'll add that relates to the floodlights themselves. Sorry, I'll just confirm that was initially the
other point I needed to get clarification on was...
It's the whole development, sorry.
Sorry, it is?
The whole development. So the development, yes. The whole use of the facility, including the floodlights.
Thank you. Now, there's been reference to a couple of other points. We'd just like to get some clarity on traffic on Wangels Road. Roger Johnson from Highways, I think, could you just summarise the council's position on their view as to the potential increase in traffic on the road?
Yes, there will be an increase in traffic on the road, but it will be at the quieter periods of the day. So in the evening, when there's not much other traffic on the road, that's when people will be playing on this pitch. So I don't see it as a problem.
Okay, all right, thank you. And could I also get Simon some clarity on the points made about ecological impact in terms of, could you confirm that our ecology officer has passed appropriate, has looked at this appropriately and has agreed that the lighting and the fencing as currently conditioned in the proposal will not create issues for wildlife or bats?
I can confirm that. So they made note of the fact that an ecological report was not submitted with the application. They were comfortable with that approach. They raised no objection, subject to those hours of use. The primary issue being bats will navigate the site, foraging and relocating to other sites about 30 minutes after sunset. And sunset during the summer months, when they are most active, are generally well after 9:15. It is May and late September where it becomes an issue, and then at that point there is only a minor overlap. The ecology officer is comfortable with that approach.
Okay,
There's
thank
really
you.
no objection. No.
Thank you. And just for clarity for members, that's of course because during the majority of months when the flood lighting will be used, bats will not be present because they'll be hibernating between November and approximately April each year.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, right, thank you. Right, over to members. We don't have a ward member on the committee, so who wishes to raise any points on this? So the first one I can see is Andrew Mickleborough. Andrew, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Simon. I feel satisfied that many of the potential issues of concern are addressed in the report. However, I do have 3 questions and one very short observation. The first question relates to the floodlights and the use of the and vacating the site. Now, the floodlights appear to be switched off using an automatic timer, and I believe the intention is for the site to be completely vacated by the time stated in the report. How will this be ensured, both for reasons of security, including for the school grounds, and for the amenity of residents living close to the entrance to the site? And I'm wondering if this might be useful to have a more specific condition attached to actual vacating the site at the end of each day of use. My second question relates to condition 9. Additional landscaping and grassland habitat will be required to achieve a biodiversity net gain. I believe that this is always important for many reasons, not the least the location in designated countryside, and because the pitch will be extended to the northeast onto land not currently used as a playing field. I would like to suggest that we discuss attaching a figure to this condition. For instance, in some locations, I recall a figure of at least 10% net increase in biodiversity has been mentioned. Thirdly, drainage. I believe Simon stated that runoff will be no greater than that of the current pitch. I'd like that to be confirmed if I heard it correctly. Can you also confirm if the claims made about the site being at high risk of surface flooding are correct? And if so, would the impact be confined to the site, or could it potentially affect the school grounds and Wangels Road? Is the intention for all of any additional water on the site to drain into the existing stormwater drains on Wangels Road? And if so, is this road ever closed because of stormwater drains that have been unable to cope? And I'd like to end, if I may, with just an observation. This has already been raised by tonight, and it's to do with the lack of an ecology report. I note that on page 27, it stated that an ecology report was not a statutory requirement. Given the location of the site, and the references to the presence of nearby bats, the proposal to erect some pretty high wire mesh fences in the vicinity, I'm really puzzled, as to why an ecology report was not submitted. And it may be that the committee might wish to take a view on this for both this application and also for future similar planning applications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Andrew. Let's see if we can get some comments on those. Going back in reverse order, Simon, could you please just give us complete clarity on the issue about water runoff, and if we have any knowledge as to whether Wangels Road is ever closed as a result of flooding?
Yes, I'll just share my screen for a second. This is council's system. Mapping system where what you have in the lighter blue is risk of surface flooding. So the actual site itself, where the pitch will be located, is not nominated as at risk of surface flooding. You'll note there is flooding through Wangels Road, and that would generally concur with anecdotal commentary from residents about there being significant issues in Wangels Road. I've also heard from residents that Thames Water are looking to upgrade their facilities through that road there as well. This application has, prior to the lodgement of the application, they did the applicant did consult with the council's drainage officer, and they have given an indication that they support the scheme in terms of being able to accommodate the likely generation rate, but it is not greater than the existing rate, because they will retain the water on site, and it will be controlled flow off the site. So that will be underneath the existing surface. So that's no change to the existing soft landscaping of the playing field.
So I think I'd say then that my understanding is that there is a surface water issue already existing in Wangels Road during heavy rain, but that our drainage officer's conclusion is that as a result of the proposed drainage arrangements for the new all-weather pitch, that problem will not be exacerbated. It certainly won't be fixed, it won't be cured. However, it sounds to me as though the work that Thames Water have indicated they will be doing in the area may actually fix the problem that exists right now. Okay, all right. Could you just give a bit further comment on Andrew's views on the ecological survey and the fact that a BAT survey was not deemed necessary?
Best answer I can give is that the ecology officer did note that, and they were comfortable with it, and that is because, my presumption is because for 6-7 months of the year this will be in use when bats will not be navigating the site, either foraging or translocating. And then in summer months when they do, it'll be after sunset, which will be, the lights won't not need to be used during the summer months. So it is only May and late September into October where bat activity is at its lowest, because it's the beginning and the end of the season, where there is potential impact, and the condition is intended to minimise that impact, 915 being a civil outcome for the site. I can't provide any more commentary on that because I'm not a specialist in that area.
Thank you. And finally, the issue about biodiversity net gain, where Councillor Mickleborough was suggesting that there should be a specific figure attached to that.
The ecologist required that as well. It was their note was that it wasn't a significant issue, but they felt that because of the NPPF requires net biodiversity gain, and the easiest way to achieve that was the condition requiring the seeding and the additional grassland over the bund, and that was sufficient to accommodate the net biodiversity gain. So it wasn't raised as a major issue.
So the ecology officer, or the officer, was happy that it would produce a gain, but it's not a quantified gain. Is that correct?
It's a gain, yeah, but it's not something that was really raised as being needed beyond what they've done. Yeah.
Thank you. Would you mind taking your shared screen down, Simon? Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. Now come on to next speaker. I can see is Pauline Jorgensen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've just got 2 questions. Firstly, did I hear right somebody say that this development is in countryside? And if so, could somebody explain to me what justification is for putting it in countryside if there are alternative sites on the same site that are not? And then secondly, I was very concerned to hear what Alison and Keith said about late notice, which meant that residents couldn't express their opinion on this application. And I just wonder what happened.
Okay, well, we'll come on to that in a moment. So, Simon, could you comment on the fact that my understanding is all of the proposed site is in designated countryside, related to in turn part of the school site not being in designated countryside, and what factors were taken into consideration in the site selection?
My understanding of policy CP11 is it allows recreational facilities in the countryside. This is a recreational facility. There are some urbanising factors to it in terms of the fencing and the lighting that were considered in addition to that. So in my view, the recreational facility is in accordance with the policy. All the playing fields are within countryside, so any facility would have to be accommodated within the countryside.
Okay, thank you, Simon. That was what I was curious about, because if some of it wasn't, then you could have moved it along and been a lot less obtrusive.
Of course, yes. Justin, I think it would be appropriate, since it's been raised by a number of members, could you please just speak very briefly about the consultation process that caused not every person involved on this application to receive notification as promptly as they should have done? Could you just comment on that, please? I'm not proposing a debate on it, but I just think it's important you comment on it.
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Chairman. We do aim to tell members and residents when an application is being considered by committee at the same time as we publish the agenda. So we aim to give a week's notice where possible. Unfortunately, we didn't on some of the items here. We didn't consult some members or some residents with a week's notice, but we have emailed everybody who emailed us and let them know about the meeting in advance. We've also obviously taken into account all the comments that residents made in submissions.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, who else have we got indicating to speak? Callum, could you help me out, because I can't see all the screens currently?
Yep, let me just bring it up. Right, because some people are guests, it's split it up. So I think if we go with Rochelle, then Gary, then...
Fine. That'll do for a start.
Okay. Yep.
Rochelle, go ahead, please.
Okay, I've got a few questions. Why isn't the lighting focus lighting? We put focus lighting in Kentley. We put focus lighting in the Embrook and Woking Football Club grounds, which has no spill. You said you have minimal spill, but you have spill. So it'd be better not to have any spill. But I want to know why. Does the 3G pitch actually increase flooding in the area? And if so, by how much? And you said the drainage officers say it's okay, but I'd like to know how much it's increasing the flooding by. Lastly, why are the residents in the area restricted on outside lights, and they're not allowed to have outside lights because of bats, but apparently this particular facility is allowed to have lights? So either they should have the same rules for everybody, they have to turn their lights off at certain times of the year, or they should have the same rights. It's not the right thing to do. Anyway.
Okay. Thank you, Rochelle. I'll certainly answer the first one. My very clear understanding is, despite comments, a comment made by one of the objectors about them needing permission for outside lights, there is no, clear understanding, there is no restriction on existing properties having outside lights. I think it may be in relation to people who wish to extend their houses. If that involves any work with the roof, they normally have to get a bat survey done. But perhaps Justin, you could confirm my understanding that if I live in the countryside and I want to put a light on the outside of my house, there's no restriction that I need to get a bat survey to put a light on my house.
I'm not aware of anyone having a restriction like that on their property in the borough.
I suspect.
Can somebody actually tell the residents that, please? They seem to think they do.
Yeah. Okay. Well. If they're watching this tonight, and I guess they will be if they're interested, they've just heard that directly. Now the drainage question that you asked, Rochelle, I think has already been answered twice. That the assessment of the council's drainage officer is that the runoff from an artificial pitch and what is proposed here is no worse or no better than the current runoff. But what we have also heard, it doesn't have a direct impact on this at this point in time, is that Thames Water have indicated they are proposing to upgrade their facilities in the area, which may in due course improve drainage in the area. But as it stands, we're being advised by the professional drainage engineers that we employ that this will not worsen runoff. And I think we have to accept their view on this unless you have clear alternative information. And the other point was you wanted to talk about focused lighting. It's not something I was aware of. Again, Simon, Rochelle was saying that the Cantley and some others have got very specific.
Most of the 3G pitches we've had have been required to have the lighting focused downward, so there's almost no spill. The spill was about 0.5% or something like that.
I think the spill here was pretty minimal from the spec I read. But Simon, would you try and clarify that again?
Yeah, that's pretty much the case. I don't think it differs in any way from the previous applications you've referred to. It's focus. The 15-metre height would allow for downward focus and minimise the outward spill. It's almost impossible to remove spill beyond the pitch boundaries, so this application achieves a satisfactory outcome in terms of spill. Definitely doesn't affect anybody, any residential properties.
Because the Embrook and Woking Football Club was required to have special lighting that did only go downward and had almost no spill. That's what I'm just wanting to figure out why don't they have it here.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Well, I think we've had the answer that it's not a specific requirement. It may well be the choice of the applicant to have more specific focused lighting, but from the lighting contour map that we were shown as part of Simon's presentation, the contour, the light spill didn't even intrude as far as Wangels Road, so it wouldn't intrude over the road, certainly. Okay, now come on to Gary Cowan. Good evening, Gary.
Oh, good evening, Simon. Before I start, I'd like to ask the officers if they could let me know the hours that we assigned to the all-weather pitch at Lucky House School, because there was an issue there when we went there, and there were residents complaining about the hours the pitch was going to be used, and I'm quite certain that we reduced the hours. Now, I can't remember, and I would just be interested in them finding that information out. Plus, I'm also interested, there are two other small pitches on this site which have floodlights, and I'd be interested to know what are the heights of the floodlights, and is there any working hour restrictions on those pitches also, because it does have a bearing on what we're looking at here. Increase in light pollution is one of the residents' issues, and noise pollution, including swearing, I mentioned. Again, if I look at this in general, there's lots and lots of things that I talk about, on balance this and on balance that. And why a bat survey was not carried out and not submitted, I find amazing. The bund is okay. I'll trust the officers on the flooding, although there are issues there. You have to excuse me while I'm working my way through the report. Then moving swiftly on as best I can. Noise disturbance. If you read the bit on noise disturbance, it's all again an unbalanced thing. The bund height is probably okay. The main conclusion: the noise will be on occasions will not be intrusible. So, sorry, it'll be noticeable on occasions. But if I lived in the houses adjoining the property, noise on occasion is not really a satisfactory answer. Traffic noise, again, when the pitch is not in use, people banging the cars, coming and going, etc., etc. That was also another thing we looked at when we looked at Luckley as well. So again, I'm very interested in what we did there in terms of the working hours. Traffic generation, 65 and 66 talks about traffic generation, and it just makes generalized comments, but it's not evidence-based in any way whatsoever. So it's just somebody's guess at what the traffic generation will be. The trees being cut down and then being replaced, again, it raises the other problem where we agree to trees being cut down and we leave it to the tree office to decide if they want to replace them or not replace them. So although we may want to see something happen, it doesn't happen, or we can't be assured it would happen. I'm nearly there. The application was not supported by a preliminary ecology appraisal, which is the point I think picked up by Andrew, and I would agree with him on that we should have done it. And again, the other point Rachel mentioned about the lighting, about the outside lights. When I read the report, I thought it was very, very strange, but I would really like clarification on that. With picking really up then I go on to the Charvel Parish Council comments, and they said that the original proposal was 90 metres from the properties, and that's been reduced to 66. And if it wasn't acceptable then, or it was never progressed then, moving it 30 odd metres closer to their properties is less acceptable. I want to go along with what Simon believes, and that is we're not here to reinvent the wheel. And I don't think it's an application I can support. There are too many what ifs and imponderables, but it would be really interesting to see how this compares with Lucky House and the working hours. But certainly 9:15 and including Saturday is an absolute no-no. Thank you.
Thank you. I will see whether we can address some of the varied points you've mentioned, Gary, but just to point out, you talked about car doors and slamming of car doors. The parking associated with this is on the southern end of the school, so a significant way off from the site, and the houses just adjacent to Wangels Road to the northwest. Simon, are you able to add any points to, certainly obviously we're in danger of getting dragged into other information, but the reference was made to Luckley House School, where a number of members of this committee attended a site visit in the days when we were allowed to do such things and considered the hours of operation there. Do you have any information on that?
Yes, I do. Luckley House, the 2019 application, it was proposed at 10 p.m. It was conditioned, not reduced by members, it was conditioned down to be variable across the season. So 6:30 GMT and 7:30 daylight saving time in March, and then 8:30 April, 9 o'clock June and July, 8:45 August, 7:45 September, and 6:45 to 5:15 in October. The main difference I'd say here is that Luckley House School did adjoin almost immediately a fairly sizable amount of woodland on its immediate edge on its, so that was the reason why there was more stringent controls and the hours of use for that. That application did have an ecology report. There was the other pitch within this school, Wangels College, is the floodlights are to 10 metres high. It's conditioned to 10 p.m. Difference for the use of the lights till 10 p.m. The difference here is that the that pitch that has approval is much closer to the school. There's reference to two other pitches. There's only one other floodlit pitch on the site. A 2017 application won't be implemented. There's a comment about being closer to residents. The previous application in 2017 was considered acceptable in terms of neighbour amenity impact. It's the school that have made the decision to move it closer to Wangels Road on the eastern side. So that change is of no consequence. It is of no adverse consequence for residents in terms of neighbour impact. Tree removal, the council has required an additional planting to accommodate the loss of those trees. Those trees that are being removed, 3 of them are substandard trees that are showing decline, and the 4th one is a more sizable tree but easily replaced. The only other comment is the traffic comment. I'd revert back to comments that Roger Johnson made in relation to the anecdotal approach to it. I don't think traffic implications are an issue. The one thing I will note that after our school use would mean that there'd be a reduced impact for the period of time when parents are picking up children. So that'll extend that period of pickup time. In the evening period, you are talking about 11-a-side football, some spectators possibly, and a referee. So you're talking 20 vehicles at most. There might be a period of time when there's a changeover, and it is highly sustainable in terms of its proximity to public transport.
All right. Thank you, Simon. Before we come on to the next speaker, could we just get clarity on one point? The temporary access that is proposed from Wangels Road to facilitate the construction, if this application is approved, is obviously, as the name suggests, temporary, and it's to be stopped up. Whilst some trees are lost there, I understood that the wording seemed a little strange that suggested that the trees, replacement trees, could be elsewhere on the site. I think we owe it to local residents and users of the road that the trees that are lost in creating the temporary entrance into the site should be replaced afterwards in situ. because otherwise you've got, as we saw from your photographs, general level of established random tree cover along that road with a gap where the temporary entrance would be. And I'm quite keen that that should be plugged by tree planting. Can we tweak that condition a bit, please?
I can look at tweaking the condition. The one thing I'll note is that Thames Water are in negotiations with residents there, and there is in the future a possibility of a pumping station being implemented in that area there. I don't think that would prevent tree planting within the immediate boundary of the site. That might need some further discussion.
In terms of members' well-established view on loss of trees, but I think it would be good if that gap could be reinstated once the temporary access is closed up. Okay, who else have we got to speak? Please, Callum.
Let me just bring the list up, Chairman. I believe the next was Abdul, but let me just quickly double check. Yes, Abdul, then Stephen, the next two.
Okay, thank you. Abdul, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I heard all the speakers, especially Keith Baker and Alison Swaddles. Within 24 hours, they only had what's going on here. However, I know we've been talking about consultation process, and I think it hasn't been fair given COVID-19 situation we are in just by email. And second question was security around school radius areas for our children's. And third one was afternoon traffic. I am one of the neighboring ward members, and the traffic in afternoon is unbelievable. So therefore, I would suggest if there's any possibility that we could defer this application and get more answers. And there's no single public which we owe to them. They need to really know what's really going on there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Simon, can you have a go at those?
I've just got the traffic. What were the two previous comments? Sorry.
Security around.
Security in terms of the school. Yeah. And I think obviously one of the points on traffic is that, as you've already mentioned, there's the potential for the concentrated school pickup time to be spread over a longer period, and then hence reduce the level of congestion because of the additional capacity for after-hours school sports. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is all it is an expectation, but it's based on the fact that some students will stay back at school. So there's an expectation that would occur. But there's no study to support that. And the evening use generally would commence from 6 or 7 p.m. through till 9:15 p.m. So it is predominantly outside of peak hour period, and it is sustainably located. I stress again that I don't think traffic is an issue, and Roger's welcome to back that up if he wishes. Not necessarily disputing that traffic is not an issue in the area, it's the fact that this is an after hours use that would be in periods of time when there's no traffic issue.
So in essence, what we're saying is, whilst there will be inevitably, I don't think anyone disagrees, that there will be additional traffic generated potentially because of the extended availability of the pitch, it will be spread over a larger period of the day, hence spreading the load and diminishing the level of queuing.
That's great.
Abdul had a question about security for children.
Security, there will be a noise supervisor, so there'll be a person operating presumably as part of the school employee, primarily to deal with noise issues. So they may be able to deal with any security issue. It's, again, the use of the pitch is in the evening, so there should be a sufficient separation between the school use and after hours pitch use. There's also been a recent approval of 2 dwellings in the immediate vicinity within an existing workshop, so that they will be occupied by school staff members. So security, I don't think, was viewed as an issue.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll now come on to Stephen Conway. Steve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this is an application that has a lot of people concerned about it, and I do understand the concerns of the Charverland Woodley Parish Councils, the local ward borough councillors, and most of all the residents closest to the site. I would feel myself concerned if I had this application on my doorstep. But I think it's really important that we make clear that as a planning committee, we've really got to listen to the technical advice we're given, and on all of the issues that have been raised so far, highways, drainage, ecology, noise, lighting, we've had professional advice that it is acceptable and will not cause material harm. I think if we as a planning committee were minded to want to go against that technical advice we've been given, we would need to come up with our own technical answers that challenge that technical judgment that we've been given by our officers. And I haven't heard anyone come up with such evidence yet. Obviously, we all have gut feelings about what is or what will be, but we really have to, if we're going to seriously contemplate not accepting this application, we really do have to come up with clear evidence as to why. And I don't think we have that. And although I understand all of the concerns that have been expressed and have great sympathy with them, I think as a planning committee, we've been given very clear professional advice that in terms of highways, drainage, ecology, noise and lighting, the impact will not be harmful. So although I understand all the concerns, I think we really are in a position where we should determine this application and support it.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. I would just point out that there's been, not in any way diminishing those objections, but looking at the site plans, there are 10 houses that I can see on the site plans to the northwest of the site, which is where the objections have come from. There may be others that are off the subset of the map that we have sight of, but 2 of those 10 have raised an objection. I just think we need to keep that in perspective. As I say, that doesn't in any way diminish their objections, but it's not as though all 10 properties that are visible are raising objections about this. I think that has to be part of our balancing act that we consider. Callum, who else do we have waiting to speak, please?
Let me
it's
just
me,
find
Simon. Malcolm.
Malcolm, is he next? Yeah, Malcolm is next, and then then Angus after Malcolm.
Callum, Callum, sorry to disturb you. The only thing I can see now is one of the guests.
Yes, indeed. Brenda, sorry to say again, could you try and turn off your camera for me? It should be like a little camera button near the microphone button. If you click that, that will turn your camera off, because all we can see is you at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, right. All right. So we'll now come on to Malcolm Richards. Malcolm, good evening.
Okay. Mind going back a little bit to these lights and hours of usage again, but it's just a bit more clarification. I remember on a couple of previous sports grounds where people were concerned about activity levels, noise and lights, that there was some lack of clarity in terms of how long they'd stay on the pitch playing. So this is 9:15, which I suppose is the latest throughout the year, with or without the lights. I'd just like to ask, is the 9:15 the time the lights go out, and therefore they've got to have stopped playing 15 minutes or so before, or can they play right up to 9:15? And the reason for that is, of course, if you just turn the lights off at 9:15 and they haven't already finished and gone away, it means there are several other lights on the site still active for them, once they're either getting changed, moving around and so on. So it's the activity level. Is the hours of use of the pitch and the facility 9:15 the very latest when they have to be away and it's closed down, or can they play up to 9:15 on the pitch with lights, with or without lights?
Okay, Simon, please.
They could in theory, but the situation here is because it's for community use, they'll be allotted half-hour or hourly slots, so the slot will finish at 9 p.m. and allow them sufficient time to leave the pitch by the 9:15, and then at 9:15 it's timer controlled, so it'll automatically turn itself off.
Okay, fine. That's the only question I had on there. Sports facilities are obviously very useful, but you have to take into account where they are and what it does to the residents. So we can't try to be looking at these in detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, good evening, Angus Ross.
Thank you, Chairman. I think much has now been said, and I very much support the comments that Stephen Conway put. I think all these concerns, which are natural to be brought up, have been answered in the report or in reassurances we've had since. One thing about noise, remember there's 3 pitches there now, and I'm sure they don't sit there totally unused. Just because we're putting one in that's going to be more usable in bad weather, I don't see that necessarily will be changing. It might be actually making things more regularized than condition. And also, I note there's a community use agreement. I recall our very lengthy discussions when we had the Embrook 3G pitch and concerns that the neighbours did have a means of community feedback, as it were, if there were any further concerns outside of what was being lawfully agreed. The floodlights, very definitely, the spillage outline is very similar to the ones we've seen before. And I think in terms of the ecology and the bats, I believe the report is very clearly differentiated between when the pitches are in use and when bats are around. And obviously can't comment on the exact timing when a bat survey has to be insisted on, but I'm very happy that all the understandable concerns have been answered in the report, and I support the application.
Okay, thank you very much. Callum, who else do we have?
We're getting there, Chairman. We have got Carl, then Chris, I believe. And yeah, there's still a couple of hands up, Stephen and Angus, but I assume they're just residual.
Okay, thank you. So good evening, Carl.
Hi, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions, these will be, and amazingly ones haven't been asked or answered already. Charville Parish Council requested improved cycling infrastructure from Charville as part of this, which obviously is not part of the planning, but the response to that was that the existing cycling infrastructure is satisfactory. I'm just interested if somebody knows what that is, because last time I was there, it was quite some time ago, it's just a country road, and there's no sort of infrastructure really other than that shared with the road. So I'm just interested to know if there have been some improvements there that I don't know about. And my second question is, the 4 trees appear to be being removed to put the access in, the temporary access. And it just seems to me, looking at the photo which I've got to the side here, as viewed from access point, which I think Simon could probably bring up, I'm trying to work out why they're being knocked down, because I could drive a bus through that gap. Obviously, there's got to be sight lines as well, but I'm just interested to know why there's any trees being felled for that access, because it seems a real waste when this is a temporary access. You know that we have to be getting rid of trees.
Okay, I'm going to initially see whether Roger Johnson can help us on the first point you raised, and possibly the second point about the need for visibility displays. Roger, are you able to enlighten Carl and the rest of the committee about cycling infrastructure in the area? I appreciate this isn't directly related to this application, but it's a reasonable point that's been made.
The simple answer is I can't give you an answer to it. I think I'm in agreement with Carl in that I don't know of any that's particular, just for a cycling provision, just for bikes. And I don't know of any that's been put in recently.
Okay, right. So I think there's the answer. It may not be the one we want to hear, but it's the answer. Are you able to comment on the Roger, on the fact that Carl believes that too many trees are being removed to form the temporary access, and I think Carl was indicating he was wondering whether that was because of the need to have appropriate visibility displays even on a temporary access.
I think it's more likely the fact that you need to have provision for two vehicles to pass each other at the access onto the road in order to prevent accidents. So if someone was coming out as one was going in and they had to jam the brakes on, it could cause an accident. So I think that it needs to be provision for two trucks to pass each other. So that might be the reason, but I've not got a plan in front of me showing which trees are going.
Carl, hopefully you'd agree that your comment, along with the one I made earlier about the fact that any trees that should be replaced to fill that gap as such. Yeah. And I think that's something that we're very keen to see. Thank you. Nothing on to Chris Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Angus and Stephen, and I can see for members of the planning committee it's often very frustrating when you're quite confident that with something like flooding that there is a problem, to find that you really don't get anywhere with it because it's a technical issue, and that at appeal we would be in an impossible position trying to overrule the experts. It is very frustrating, but we have to live with it. But there are lots of other things which of course we can assess. I don't find the points against this application very convincing, but I don't think that the benefits of the scheme have been brought out. This is a great benefit to the school and also to the public who will be able to use the facility in the evening. And I think clearly when you compare the two, if you want to use the word balance, the balance is in favour of the application. So I should be voting in favour.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Chris. I think we've now heard from all those members of the committee who wish to speak. Firstly, I would like to ask whether anybody wishes to make an alternative proposal to that is in front of us. Callum, can you confirm no one's indicated?
That is correct, Chairman.
Right. Okay. In that case, members, we've had a thorough debate on this. Just as a reminder that whilst a number of issues that affect the local area are relevant, by the way, sorry, I've just been advised that the tree removal is to avoid the loss of a much more significant specimen tree. So it requires, rather than losing one specimen tree, it's losing some lesser trees, which is probably something that is overall better in terms of the quality of tree that's remained. Thank you for that. So just to clarify that this is an application is in an area where we've already heard there are some existing issues such as traffic and flooding, but we can't require a new application, an application that's coming forward to address issues that already exist. That isn't an obligation that we can impose upon the school or any other applicant. We can require them to address things that will impact the area, and hence the need for the bund in the northwest corner, the fact that the lights are of focused variety and would minimise light spill within the area, and the fact that the lighting times and use of the pitch times has been reduced from that they originally sought. So I think that's it in summary, and I'm going to ask members now whether they are prepared to support the officer recommendation, along with the points raised in the members' update, which includes the restriction on hours during construction, which was previously missing. So could members please indicate whether they support application 203456 by raising their hand? Can you confirm, Callum, please?
I have 9 members with their hands up currently. One's just disappeared, but there were definitely 9.
There were definitely 9. Right. In that case, I would ask now, could you please take your hands down? And then next, I will ask if any members are wishing to abstain.
I see Abdul Loys.
Loys abstain. Thank you. And finally, I was going to ask, does any member wish to decline to approve this application, to refuse? And I see Gary Cowan, I think.
Yep, that's correct, Chairman.
Okay, so just to confirm, there are 11 members of the committee, 9 have voted to support it, 1 has abstained, and 1 has recommended to refuse. So on that basis, planning application 203456 is approved. Thank you, members. We now move on to the second item on the agenda, which I hope is probably less controversial than that last one. This is application 203534 for a land being used for stables and equestrian purposes out in Swallowfield. And I think Mark Croucher, you're going to be taking us through this one. Good evening, Mark. If you could take us straight in, please.
Sure, I'll just share my screen. Hopefully members can see that. So yeah, this is an application for the erection of 8 stables for personal use of the applicant who lives at Loddon Court. There'd be a small track with it as well, which would link into an existing track. There'd also be a change of use from the surrounding agricultural land to a mix of agricultural and equestrian. It should also be noted that the application is part retrospective as the base to the stables has already been laid. I'm just moving quickly through some plans and photographs. So this is the location plan on the screen now with the site outlined in red. Members may be able to make out the blue line. That denotes the residential curtilage of Loddon Court. And then the red line surrounding it is the wider agricultural land around the building. As I said in my report, it's the agricultural land has more sort of the character of estate land. It's not arable farmland. It is sort of mown, and it is also grazed by sheep as well. So it's not sort of used for arable farmland at the moment. You'll see Lambs Lane to the south there. It should be noted as well that I'm sure members are aware of this, but this section of Lambs Lane is very different in nature to the section to the north where the school is. Sort of a separate entity, and it comes down to the south and it ends in a small cul-de-sac there. So it is very quiet. It is very sort of it is single track and not many vehicle movements. And just one other thing to point out is where the cursor is now, there is a bridleway which goes in each direction. So the site is very close to bridleways as well. And the southern bridleway goes under the A33 and links into other rights of way. So this is just a site plan of the stables, and you can just see the concrete apron of the base there and the stable building on top of it, and also the sort of modest extension to the track. It's not shown on there, but you can see on the aerial photograph, which I'll show in a minute, it does link into an existing track through the site. These are some elevations of the building. So the building will be 2 meters in height to eaves level and 4.35 to the apex of the roof. As you can see, it's a utilitarian structure, as these things in the countryside generally should be, timber clad, and it has sort of a black corrugated roof with some perspex sheets. You can see the floor plan there as well. So it's got 8 stalls for 8 horses and then a storage area as well. Moving on to the aerial photograph, this is just to show the site in a bit more context, and you can sort of see the character of the land around it. It's also worth noting that to the north of the site where the cursor is, you can see that these are used as paddocks as well, and there's a menage or sand school as well to the north as well. So there is equestrian uses around the area. I think there's also some paddocks as well to the south. And again, you can just sort of faintly make out where Lambs Lane goes to the south, and it basically stops there and turns into the bridleway. One thing I didn't mention, which I'll just mention here, is the access to the residential property at Loddon Court is actually to the north. That's the main access, but there is an existing access to the south where the stables will be, which will be the entrance to the stables, and I'll show a photograph of that in a moment. So this is just a picture of the application site, and you can see the you can see the concrete base laid there and the trees around it and the general character of the area. It should be noted that arboricultural officers have had a look at the impacts on trees and they're satisfied, and that's set out in my report. This is just stood back a bit, and again you can see, just make out the concrete apron to the building, and the track will sort of go across left here. There is an existing building here, and this is sort of quite an old building which is just used for storage purposes at the moment. And to the right as well, this would be land used for the equestrian and agricultural use. So this is the existing southern access. So this isn't the access to the house, but this is a sort of secondary access to the sort of wider land and the property if necessary. And this will be where the stables will be accessed from. So just making some quick conclusions, Chairman. The principle of the stables in the countryside is acceptable in its appropriate development. It can't really be seen at all. It's about 160 metres from Lambs Lane, so it's well hidden within the site. The size of the building is commensurate to the size of the holding, as is set out in the report. The impact on trees has been deemed acceptable, again, for the reasons put in the report. There are no neighbour or ecology impacts. There are no objection from the parish council, and there was one letter of support. Both those comments did say that there should be a condition ensuring it's not used for commercial purposes, and that is condition 4. So we've put that on there. So to conclude, Chairman, it's recommended for approval for the reasons set out and also the conditions recommended. And I'll just hand you back the screen.
Thank you, Mark. That's a quick gallop through. No pun intended, of course. If members, this is I hope you will agree, this is a very uncontentious application. It's only in front of you because the land area is more than a hectare, and we've seen that there's no objections. And we're going to hear now from Emily Temple, who is the agent on behalf of the applicant, and then throw it over to members. I hope, members, that we can move through this one quite quickly. Good evening, Emily.
Good evening, Chair. Can you hear me?
Thanks.
Lovely. So thank you, Chairman, and good evening. We're grateful to the officers this evening for their positive report for this proposed development. The applicant moved to the property some 18 months ago. They're experienced horse owners and they desire to bring their family's horses to this site as well. The family is large and they own a number of horses, and so 8 stables are proposed. But I can confirm the development is solely for their personal use, and it is not for commercial livery. And as such, vehicle movements will be low. The stable base, as you see, has been constructed, but on being advised by the council full planning was required, all development ceased and the necessary application was made, along with the accompanying reports for trees and ecology. Further information can be provided by condition as recommended in the committee report, and we're agreeable to those conditions. The stable will be timber clad in appearance with a shallow roof and is well screened, being set well back from the road, behind an existing building and away from any public vantage points. The surrounding land is presently agricultural and is grazed by a small number of sheep. A mixed use is applied for in this application so that those paddocks can be grazed by both the sheep and horses as a result of this development, and no other changes are proposed to that wider land. The horses can be exercised off-site as there is very good access to nearby bridleways. So we're grateful to the officers for their assistance with this application and ask that you support their recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So members, notwithstanding what I've said, do we have any members wishing to? Andrew, right, Andrew, go ahead, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just two questions, if I may. I am concerned that not only has a concrete slab base for the building already been laid, but that it encroaches into the root protection area of a large oak tree. I suspect that it's not possible to guarantee the measures proposed to ameliorate potential impact on that tree will save it, but I do, of course, hope that they will be sufficient. There are a number of other large trees shown in the photographs, and that does concern me. Can officers assure us that they are not likely to be harmed by the proposal, including by likely areas of hard standing and ground compaction around the stables? And the second question is that, of course, if this application was for commercial stables, lots of other matters would have to be considered. Is there any potential or merit in specifying that the planning permission is only given for this particular applicant and their immediate family, and that if the ownership of the property was to transfer at a later stage, that permission would have to be reapplied for or would lapse.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. On your second point, which is in essence taking the quite unusual step of invoking a personal clause to say this is permission, I can see no grounds for doing that, because the principal concern would be that because it's obviously 8 stables, that it could be used potentially for commercial use, which would generate more traffic. But we do have a very specific condition on here, and we have also had it confirmed by the agent that this is conditioned to be for the use of the applicant and their family only. So I think it would be an inappropriately harsh condition to apply, but I would be happy to hear a comment from the professional officers on that. And the other issue relating to the tree, I think if you see in the report that because the base is a solid base, my understanding is they are now proposing to drill apertures through the concrete base to help improve drainage in that area to minimize the impact on the tree. Obviously, this tree, along with other trees on the site, are a significant way off from any public viewpoint. So they're not the sort of trees that would normally ever be covered by a tree protection order. But clearly, from the photographs, we can see the tree that it is alongside is quite a magnificent old tree. We also note from the photographs that there are storage containers there, which are conditioned to be relocated to a more appropriate location to protect the root protection area. But Mark, would you be able to give us some more professional views on the points that Andrew has raised?
Yeah, so dealing with the tree impact, first of all, our tree officers have looked at it and they're happy with it, is, I guess, the short answer. To give a slightly longer one, the encroachment into the RPA is about 17.5%. I think it's generally about 20% where arboriculturists start to raise concerns. And it was detailed in the arboricultural information submitted that it was erected above ground level, 10 centimetres above ground level, so there wasn't any excavation in terms of impacting the roots. And as the chairman pointed out, there will be holes drilled into the base so water can permeate through into the rooting environment. The impact assessment also set out some other measures in terms of, if you notice on the photos, there's quite a lot of storage around the base of the tree in terms of sort of, I think there's vehicles and there's sort of storage containers, and the proposal is to remove those as well, and also reseed parts of it. So potentially there could actually be a betterment. I wouldn't say definitely that there would be a betterment, but there would be some potential positives in terms of the actual development. So in terms of trees, particularly that tree, yeah, we're happy that there'd be no unacceptable impact. With regards to the other trees, it's not particularly close to any other trees to warrant such a concern. And as that's the nearest tree and it's acceptable, then it should be acceptable. Well, it is acceptable regarding the impact on the other trees. So we're happy with that aspect of it. Moving on to the commercial side, yeah, as the chairman pointed out, we have got condition 4, which does tie it to the owners of Loddon Court. My professional view is that I think it would probably be unreasonable if we gave a personal condition, just because that it's been demonstrated that the house and the surrounding land and the ownership of the house is large enough to accommodate 8 horses and therefore 8 stables. So it could be that someone else moves into the house at a later date would also want a stables, and I imagine the property would probably be marketed with that as a benefit. So I do think it would be unreasonable. In terms of the planning practice guidance, it does tend to it does recommend that we try and avoid personal conditions unless it's absolutely necessary. And I think in this case it's not necessary.
Okay.
Thank you for those answers. Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Could I just ask about the separate entrance for the stables? Do we, I mean, apart from the fact, obviously, that entrance is long established and has not, as far as I can see, been introduced by the new owners, but if it's to be used by the owners, I was just wondering why there is a separate entrance giving access to the stables that doesn't involve going through the main property entrance and past the property to access the stables. As I say, I appreciate they're not responsible for putting that in, but could you comment on that?
Having visited the site, all I can really say is that it's easier to access the site from the southern entrance. There's already, as I say, an existing track there, whereas if you access it from the northern entrance, which is the one to the main house, there's no made up road to sort of drive around to the stables or access tracks. You'd basically be driving on the grass essentially. So I think it's just a practical one that essentially it's easier to access it from that side.
Thank you, that's fine. Any other members wishing to raise any points on this? Callum, I can't see anyone showing, can you?
No, Chair.
In that case, members, I think we've covered that. We're going to go to the vote on planning application 203534. Could members please indicate by raising their hand whether they support this application? So that's, I believe, unanimous.
That's correct.
So there's no need to take any other votes on that. Thank you very much. Could you lower your hands, please? We now come on to planning application 203514, which is Hilltop Road in Early. Natalie, I believe this is an application you're taking us through tonight.
Hi there.
Thanks. So if you could like to take us straight into that application, please.
Good evening. This is planning application relating to 34 Hilltop Road in Early. It's a full planning permission seeking to convert a bungalow to form 2 self-contained dwellings comprising of 1 3-bedroom apartment on the ground floor and 1 1-bedroom apartment on the first floor with installation of 4 roof lights. The application is part retrospective. This follows the recent construction of extensions from an earlier planning permission, which I will cover later in this presentation. As you can see from the site location plan, the application site is located in a residential street in Early. This Google Street Map image shows the bungalow in May 2019. There was an existing drop curb and hard standing at the front of the property. As referred to earlier, in July 2019, planning permission was granted for a part single, part 2-storey rear extension, demolition of existing chimneys, internal alteration and changes to fenestration. Many of the works associated with the planning permission have taken place, as can be seen in the site photos, including the rear extensions, which can be seen in the second photo. Further photos show a side access door, which would provide access to the proposed first floor apartment. There are no physical changes to the exterior of the building except for the 4 roof lights. There are 3 roof lights proposed facing Oakley, the road to the west of the application site, and there is 1 further roof light facing 32 Hilltop Road. The roof lights have already been installed, and this is the retrospective element of the proposal. The roof light facing 32 Hilltop Road can be seen in the second photo. The roof lights are shown in the elevations, which are currently on screen. The roof lights are positioned at 1 metre head height. The application seeks to subdivide the approved extended dwelling to 2 apartments. The layout of the proposed accommodation is shown on the floor plans, with a 3-bedroom apartment on the ground floor and a 1-bedroom apartment on the first floor. As shown previously, the frontage was historically hard surface. As can be seen from the 2 plans on screen, when planning permission was granted in July 2019, there was permission to widen the drop curb and 4 off-street parking spaces. This scheme also proposes to widen the drop curb. In addition, the current proposal includes a landscaping condition which was not previously attached and is therefore a betterment. Councillors will have seen the update report, and 3 further conditions relating to parking and the drop curb are recommended, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. We now come on to the registered speakers. Just to confirm, we're going to go first with Brenda Cutler, a resident, who will be sharing her 3 minutes time with Tim Marsh. And then finally, we'll be coming to Shirley Boyt, who is the Borough Council ward member for this location. So firstly, straight across to Brenda Cutler, just please remember about leaving time for your colleague to speak as well. Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, okay. Right, this part of Hilltop Road has already been overdeveloped with 6 new houses on what was the original 34A. There are parking problems already because of this, and an HMO at number 65 on the opposite side of the road leaves vans and cars parked in the road, so there would not be any space in the road for any additional cars to park. Flats are out of character with Hilltop Road and would spoil its character. Number 30 Hilltop Road, only 2 doors away, has been divided into 2 dwellings, and this has caused a lot more traffic as the tenants have 2 children, 2 cars, and have quite a few visitors. Number 30 is still an eyesore as the work to divide was never completed, and there is no greenery in the front garden. Residents in Hilltop Road are very upset by this proposed application. As the ACER representative for Hilltop Road, they have asked that I do what I can to share their views with you and hope that you will refuse this application.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we come on to Tim Marsh from ACER, the Residents Association. Good evening, Tim.
Good evening. Can I refer to 2 points in the planning report? On paragraph 15 on page 91, the roof light is set at 1 metre height. Therefore, although the 1.7 metre standard for obscure glazing inside windows, it shouldn't need to apply in this case. Now, although that might be such a case when standing, most of the time in the house you'll be sitting. As the windows are so low, anyone sitting down would have a perfect view, and we therefore ask that obscure glazing is a requirement. Second point, paragraph 26 on page 92, the parking standard referred to, which I have a copy here, provides allocations for houses in new developments. There is actually no parking standard specifically for developments within existing housing stock. Development of housing stock into rented properties typically brings more vehicle ownership associated with the property. This is our experience and a particular problem at this end of Hilltop. The additional vehicles have a negative impact on the character of the area and certainly not enhance the street as implied in paragraph 10 on page 90. The proposal would result in additional tenants who are likely to have their own cars, adding to the already inadequate parking in the immediate area. The proposal is therefore an overdevelopment and should be refused.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. And if we can now come on to Shirley Boyd. Good evening, Shirley.
Good evening, Simon. Thank you. Yeah, under the previous application, number 1914411, approval was given for an extended 3-bedroomed family dwelling. And every objection to that application expressed concern that the intention would be to turn habitable rooms into bedrooms at a later date. The inclusion of 3 bathrooms being a clue to that future intent. Before the committee now is an application to turn a single dwelling into 2 dwellings with potential for 8 residents. This is overdevelopment by stealth. The property in question was operating as an HMO before this development commenced, so my residents know exactly what to expect if this application is improved. Potential for 8 permanent vehicles with only 4 parking spaces, and that is without visitors. And I would additionally like to draw members' attention to the fact that the new dropped curb, which has been installed, is not as shown on the drawings and will not allow access to the front of the site and for vehicles to park as shown on the diagram. And I think that the officer, Natalie, did actually show the picture of the front of the house, but Callum, I had sent you a photograph as well and wondered if you could share it on the screen. And I am glad to see that a soft landscaping plan is being recommended here, but my experience tells me that recommending is one thing and the actual implementation of the scheme will be something we'll wait for with bated breath in the area. Thank you.
Thank you for all the speakers. I think if I'm correct now, we should come on to the members of the committee, but could we just get clarification on a couple of points that the what we're talking about this evening is not the construction or work on the dwelling, it's the subdivision of the single dwelling as it is presented currently to turn it into 2 separate dwellings, and the subdivision of the rear garden to provide sort of amenity space for potential occupants of both those dwellings. I think the other issue that members will probably want to explore is the issue relating to the roof light on one flank of the house, which is somewhat forward of the building line, because there's the 2 properties concerned do not share the same building line. Normally roof lights that overlook the rear are not an issue, but obviously overlooking the front can be of concern, particularly when the base height of the window is significantly lower than normal. So without further ado, I'll come straight on to Carl Duran as board member. Good evening, Carl.
Good evening again, Simon. Okay, yes, right. I have 4 questions on this. I'd like to kind of pose them individually and get answers each time, because it saves us going back and trying to remember, especially me. So the first question is, can you explain the parking requirements, specifically because in the early town council's objection, they stated it should be 5 spaces, and the report clearly says 4. Not suggesting that the report is wrong, but I'd just be interested to know why they're thinking it's 5. Well, you can't tell me that, but if it is 4, just to clear that up.
Roger, I suspect you're going to address this one.
Yeah. The parking requirements are met with the 4 parking spaces. I'm not quite sure why someone should think it's 5. They have actually met the parking standard. They could even get away with 3 parking spaces, to be honest with you, if none of them were allocated. But I don't think that's what they want in this case.
Okay, thanks. Just kind of looking also in the car parking spaces, can we get an explanation on the point of condition 5 on landscaping, really? I mean, when I look at the photo of the site and look at the car park out front, when it's full of 4 cars, I'm wondering where this conditioned planting, which is required by planning policy, is going to go.
Yeah, Natalie, could you help us on that one?
Yeah. So when planning permission was granted in July 2019, there were 4 parking spaces shown at the front of the site, and that already has permission, so they could implement that permission if this application wasn't successful this evening. With this application, there's 4 parking spaces shown at the front of the site as well, and we've included a condition that they include a landscaping scheme, so that they could show some soft landscaping at the front of that site to provide some betterment to a scheme that already has planning permission.
Okay, thanks. I think originally there's only been 2 applications. There's been 3 applications on this site, one of which was refused, and I think in all of those there was complaints about this front garden. As you can see on the photo that the gardens to the right of the site is what it was originally like. It was a normal front garden walled on either side, and it's slowly been turned into a car park pretty much. Although yes, I accept the point that we can't consider it here because that's already been agreed in the previous planning application. It's gone right against TB06, which basically is trying to keep the fact that boundary treatments and existing pattern of openings is all there, and we've allowed that to be obliterated, basically. It's a big mistake, I think, but I accept that's not something we can do anything about now.
I would also note that the image, the street view image, was prior to the planning permission to extend the property, so it was already hard surface before that. I would just highlight that.
Yeah,
and I think we probably also just need to be absolutely clear then that this property as built has planning permission and currently meets the planning permission, with the possible doubt around the windows, which are the Velux windows, which are an introduction. But overall, this, just looking at it purely from a landscape perspective, and I appreciate there are many other aspects of it, there was no landscaping condition in the current approval, and if we were to approve this, we are able to apply the landscaping condition that's detailed in the report. So in that sense, it could be seen as an improvement over what is currently there, which doesn't require landscaping.
I accept that, but I think that residents in Hilltop will know what's happened in other homes where which are effectively HMOs, which is what this is, despite the legal requirements not being. That's in my opinion.
Hang on, Carl. We just need to make it very clear, please. This house is not an HMO. So you've just strongly implied it is an HMO. It is not an HMO. Okay.
Let me rephrase that. It's being run as an HMO. It's not legally an HMO, but it is being run as one, and has been for quite some time now. I'll take that point. Okay, on to the next question then. Waste storage on page 92, paragraph 25. There's a comment about both of the proposed apartments would have private amenity space where refuse and recycling could be stored. And I'm just wondering what the feasibility is that upper floor flat is going to use that space in that way, considering how far away it is from it.
Included in the pack was the proposed site plan, which, as you've seen, shows that both of the proposed apartments have that amenity space. So it does provide the opportunity for it to be stored there.
Yeah, I take that point. The point I'm making is that it's a distance walk away to get to it for the flat. Obviously, they've got to go downstairs, out their door, to the end of the drive, round into the road, and then all the way along the road to get to their access. I'm just, I'm not suggesting this is a planning problem, but it doesn't seem to me that the people are going to do that. It's not going to happen. So I don't know how that's going to be a problem for them. Okay, moving on.
Sorry, Carl. I think that they've got a gated access. They don't have to go down the that shared access road and round.
Oh, is there? I didn't see that on the plan. Sorry.
There's a gate next to the garage.
Okay, I thought that led into the other access.
So there's access from the ground floor flat directly into that space, and then for the first floor flat, they go into the gate next to the garage.
Okay.
So there's no need for them to walk along the road or anything.
Okay, my mistake on that one. This is the question I'm really kind of worried about in terms of this application, though, and it does concern roof lights. I don't understand why that's not considered to be an overlooking problem. I think if this wasn't built already, and this was put to us as an extension that was going to happen with those lights, which is not what happened in the previous application. Obviously, this is retrospective. We'd be saying 1.7 meters as the minimum at the bottom of those roof lights. That's what we'd do, and I don't think anyone here would disagree with that. Yeah, we have one here which is I assume the base height is 1 meter above floor level, and it's looking over somebody else's access ways, and of course the access ways for the bottom flat, which of course will be a separate property should this application succeed. So that worries me. That's we wouldn't have allowed that, I don't think, if this was coming forward, if they were asking to plan this. But obviously it's already been built, so that's a different thing. And we can't really, I assume that we aren't in a position where we can say, right, we condition that it needs to be 1.7. It's already been built. This is what's here. So that's a real worry for me. A bigger problem is, I think, there's a second overlooking problem here. And that's a window that is already there and was already built and was allowed in the previous application. But because now we are turning these into two flats, I should say, and we have two separate private amenity spaces, that window at the back, at the top floor, is now looking over a private amenity space. Now, I know that we usually say for a back-to-back, obviously this is between buildings, 22 meters, but in that is the idea that we have two gardens of probably 11 meters distance, so that the window overlooking would be quite some distance away. This window is 0 meters from that garden. So again, I think by virtue of that becoming private amenity space, the applicant has created a problem with that window, which wasn't there when it was an original house, or one house. And if I note in the report, it says something about this is not a problem as in most flats, those kind of developments have communal gardens, and that's true. But this doesn't have communal gardens. It has two separate private amenity spaces. So, I'm in a fix with that one as well, really, because I don't think I could vote for that, because that is overlooking straight into somebody else's garden. As I said, I have referred to this as a HMO, and I think that is how it's going to be used, in which case that probably wouldn't be a big problem. But that's not what is in this application. It's two separate homes, which could be two separate families, and we have to allow for that, I think.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Carl. I have significant sympathy for the point that both Asa raised and Carl has raised, and I raised this prior to the meeting with officers. And I think I'm going to take this opportunity at this stage, before hearing from anybody else, to actually suggest that we would need to have a condition on that particular Velux roof window that starts at 1 metre height, that it should be both fixed shut and obscure glazed. And I was hoping, Carl, you might support that.
Yeah, I would support that. Obviously, it doesn't do anything about the other window, but that's a separate issue for the time being. But yes, I'd support that condition, certainly.
Well, let's hear what others have got to say, and then as we reach a conclusion, we will revisit that as a potential change to the existing condition. Who else wishes to speak on this?
We've got Rochelle, Abdul, Pauline, and Stephen.
Right, thank you. We'll take them in that order. Rochelle?
I've got a couple of questions. One, I agree with your idea that it definitely should have the obscure glazing on that thing. It sounds like a good way to take the mick to first put in the roof lights illegally and then go retrospective afterwards. I've already got this one, so why should I take it out? Adequate parking. It looks like the front garden is a complete another car park. And I think you get a whole lot of cars in there if they wanted to. I'm not sure about that, but I'd like to see that, because some of the pictures are shown that of the existing car park. We've also talked about landscaping. I don't see any plans for what the landscaping is. Where are they going to put this landscaping? Is it going to be in the front? Where is it going to be? How big is it going to be? There is no description of that, because I'm looking at the plot line, the plot plan on page 97, and it's got the 4 spaces and newly constructed dropped curb, but no landscaping in there. It looks like the same as it is right now. Last of all, since this is an unofficial HMO at this point, my question is, how many cars are there right now? So there's a number of questions there.
Okay, well, I'm not really sure the number of cars that are parked there at this point in time is relevant to our determination of the application, and I don't think we should venture there. Could we look at the Natalie? Could you comment on the issue about the landscaping and how that would be accommodated?
Yeah, if you look at the wording on page 85 of the committee report, it requires the submission of a landscaping scheme. So that is why it's not shown on the current plans, because that is a detail that would be submitted if the application was to be approved this evening.
It might have been better to have the plan available to us before the plan gets approved, because we're approving something with a landscaping plan that may be approved later on, but we'd like to see the landscaping plan of the plan we're approving. I don't know about you, but that doesn't make much sense. Because in the future, anybody can say, "Oh, we want to do this, we want to do this, that, and the other thing," and the plan will come out sometime in the future, and we won't ever see it.
Right. In all fairness, Rochelle, in all fairness, if you look at most applications that we consider and determine at the committee, it includes matters that we are leaving to the officers to finalise the details of with the applicant, and this is something that we do quite regularly. So it's not unusual in this particular case, but.
How much space is going to be used for landscaping? How much of the front garden there that's presently a car park going to be used for landscaping? They can tell me the percentage at least. 20%, 10%, 1%?
I don't think they can tell you that, because they're seeking a submission from the applicant to cover this item, and it will then be up to the officers to determine whether what is proposed is adequate. Justin, or would you like to comment on this point, please?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, in practical terms, what we'd be expecting really is, if you're on that plan on page 97, is landscaped area to the right of the parking spaces and probably in front of the bay window. What percentage of the frontage it is, I don't know. But as Simon says, you generally leave conditions to officers to deal with, and I don't see why this needs to be any different in this situation.
Okay. All right. Can we come on to Abdul now, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Naturally, referring to page 90, number 9, how policy CP3, how relevant to this application? If you could please enlighten a bit more regarding this application. Thank you.
So CP3
relating to the character issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as I've said, in terms of actual physical changes to the building, we're starting at a point where planning permission has already been granted for the extensions. There may be some introduction of residential paraphernalia, but in terms of actual physical development, the main change is the introduction of the roof lights. And that's why I've come to the conclusion in terms of character and of the area that I think that it's acceptable in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Let's see what committee think of.
Okay, right, moving on, just a moment, please. Let's check something in here. Okay, all right, could we go straight to Pauline Jorgensen now, please? Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to talk about one of the other items that we're actually approving here, which is the 1.8 metre high close bordered fence halfway down the garden at a diagonal angle. That's not currently part of the application or part of the original application or part of the original proposal. I mean, I'm concerned about the parking as well, but I understand we're stuck with that because it's already been approved. The thing that confuses me, and maybe the planning office can explain, is why are all the 4 parking spaces at the front? And does that diagonal boarded fence, which then separates this essentially into 2 plots, run the risk of us having some future application for a conversion of the old garage into a further small dwelling of some sort or another, with the access still being used down the side? Because I would have thought that if you're short of parking, you would use that garage for parking and the drive. And I'm very surprised that that's not part of the plan.
Okay, again, this was something I raised with the officers prior to the meeting, Pauline, was and I understand it is buried in the report that because of the upstairs apartment being very small, the garage is proposed to provide storage for the residents of that, because there will be very limited storage for possessions and things there. So access to the garage would need to be maintained to get access to the storage in the garage, I guess.
Is it possible to condition the application so that it can't be?
No, we can't place conditions
on something
that relate to a future application that may wish to come forward. Clearly, if a different application came forward to turn a garage on this site into a dwelling, that would obviously have to meet various planning requirements, and I suspect it's not something that would be getting broad support.
So could we condition the garden for the first floor apartment to say that it must continue to be residential garden space?
Officer, could you comment on that?
It would be residential garden space by default, so any other use of it would require planning permission. So if somebody wanted to use it to build another dwelling on, they would have to apply. Okay,
so in essence, it is conditioned already.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can understand also, Pauline, I think where you were hinting at that the diagonal subdivision of a rear garden is frankly very contrived, pretty strange arrangement. But there's nothing that says people can't can't decide to split the garden that way rather than perhaps more conventional ways. Okay.
No, I understand that. I'm just worried about what might happen to that garden next.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately something that we cannot speculate on. It's something we have to be alert to in the future. If I can now come on to Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I seem to be invisible. I think something's gone wrong with my camera, but I hope you can hear me at least.
Well, you know it's you.
Yeah, well, you're right. It is indeed me. Thank you very much. I think it's really quite important. I think we probably are getting to this point, but we need to fully recognise that the built form that we see in these plans is there. It's being approved. We're not being asked to judge that. We're being asked to judge the change to 2 dwellings from 1. And I do think that the key issues to me are the roof roof windows or lights or VLEX. I'm not quite sure how we describe them, but I do think it is imperative to have obscure glazing on that flank window. That relationship is totally inappropriate with a roof light of that height, and it really is vital that should be done. But I'm also a little bit concerned about a point that Carl raised, and I think I would welcome some clarification because I might have missed Natalie's answer to this point. But that rear window in the current, the approved extension upper window, which is to be, I think, a window in the bedroom, is actually overlooking now a partitioned garden, but it's an upper. It's going to be the first floor dwelling that overlooks the garden of the rear floor. Now, is that an acceptable relationship? We normally would think you shouldn't be able to look directly into somebody else's garden in that kind of way, but does that kind of relationship or that kind of awkwardness not really count when we're talking about this kind of conversion? I'd be interested to know whether this is a problem in planning terms.
Thank you, Stephen. Natalie, could you attempt to address that key point that Stephen just raised?
Yeah, I think it's a balance because the proposal is for 2 apartments, and the alternative would be that you have it as communal space, but they've proposed it to be private amenity space, so it would provide the potential future occupants of the apartments to have some form of private space, and I think I've covered it in paragraph 13 of my officer report, and that it will provide some form of private space, and given that it's a flatted development, I think that it's acceptable.
Yeah, okay, I suppose my query was just whether it really was private space, if it could be overlooked so easily, whether that impairs its quality as a private space.
I mean, some apartment accommodation wouldn't always have its own communal space, and in some cases you might have a balcony, so in terms of what they are being provided with, it's providing with some form of amenity space, and it has a level of being private, but although you could say because there is the potential for overlooking from there, but there is some form of amenity space for future residents.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Callum, who else do we have indicating to speak?
Let me just check.
I'm on the list, Simon.
Sorry, could you just hang on, Malcolm? Could you just hang on? Callum, could you answer the question?
I believe it is just Malcolm, actually, Chairman.
Okay, that's good. I've wasted time. Thank you. Malcolm, over to you.
Yes, my point, in fact, if it's already approved, it's probably going to be no consequence, but I think it's an important one. It's the car parking. From the photos that we saw at the beginning, clearly there's a very large area in front for parking, but it's not an area that would allow the cars, as shown on this diagram, to park in that way, because you go in the gateway, you would expect them to be sideways two tandem lines. There's also space where you could probably squash more cars down the side. And so the point is, it is a large car parking area, but the problem is when they're in there, this is not meant to be a bomb site car park that they used to have years ago. When you've got lots of cars in there, which you could get in, it's how do they get out safely? How do they get in and out safely? I think there's not enough space there to do proper turning around and coming out. So there's potentially to have that number of cars in there, even though there's physical space for it, there's not enough space for manoeuvring to get out without having to perhaps reverse out onto the road. So what do we do, if anything, that makes it safer? Is there a condition we can put?
Yeah, we understand your point, Malcolm, but of course the 4 parking spaces have already been approved under an early application. So Natalie may be able to give us some enlightenment as to how that arrangement will work, but it's not a matter that we can consider at the application.
I wasn't trying to change spaces, just wondering whether you could put a condition that says they have to enter and leave in forward.
Malcolm,
yeah.
Could we hear from Natalie, please? Thank you.
Yeah, that photograph was taken before any of the works took place. So the proposal is for an extended drop curb. So my understanding would be that that wall would be removed, and then you would have the enable to go reverse directly off or drive straight on. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, okay. And the last point there was, I think that window on the upper floor should be frosted so that they don't look down onto someone else's garden instead of their own. I agree with the frosting and obscurity of the window. Thank you.
Okay, so we've heard from all those that speak. I now come back to Carl's point and the point I'd previously also raised with the officers, that I was going to make a proposal that we amend the relevant condition to ensure that the window on the flank we're talking about, which has a very low height, that should be both obscure glazed and also not opening. But I note that there is another window, it's a dormer window at the front, which appears to allow some natural daylight into that room. But I didn't know whether officers had any comment on the impact of a non-opening window.
And Chairman, we hadn't done it specifically because it was a window looking into a front garden, so we felt that there were already public views available. But I do take members' point. If you were minded to obscure glaze it, then yes, you're quite right. The room would be served by the window to the front as well.
Okay.
I just wanted clarification if you were proposing it to be non-opening as well.
Yes, that was part of my original proposal. So I'm proposing, members, that we amend that condition to have a obscure glazed non-opening window on that flank to address the fact that the roof light starts way lower at 1 metre off the ground compared with the normal height, which is 1.7 metres, which is deliberately to avoid easy overlooking of adjoining properties. Carl, I assume you will second that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, members, could you please indicate by raising your hands whether you'd support that amendment? Okay.
Simon, I support it. My hand has disappeared.
Okay. I hope only virtually, Gary. Okay, so yes, that is approved. I don't think there was anybody who wasn't in support of that. So
I didn't see Councillor Andrew Mickleborough. I'm not sure if he was having an issue as well.
Andrew, did you support it?
No, I declared an interest. I'm not taking part in this.
Oh, of course you did.
My apologies. We both forgot that. Thank you. All right. Okay. So on that basis, the condition is proposed condition is modified. Now, members, we now come on to the matter in hand as to whether you're prepared to approve application 203514. We've heard that it meets interior space standards. The outside space, which whilst oddly configured, also meets some normal amenity space standards. The parking standards are met, but are not part of this application. There were significant concerns expressed about the the roof window, which I hope we have partially addressed by modification of the condition. The one item that remains unresolved with the comments about the overlooking of the rear garden from the upstairs apartment. I would draw your attention to the fact that the room that overlooks it is a bedroom rather than a living room. I'm not sure there's anything else we could do, because that is the position we're currently in. I think it would be unreasonable to say that that window should be obscure glazed as well or blocked off. But I just at this point, I just wanted to check if anybody has an alternative proposal how to address that concern. I see nobody indicating. So in that case, yes, sorry,
Sorry, could I just ask if it's possible for Justin just to comment on this point about overlooking? Because to my mind, it seems that, you know, at the moment, I'm probably going to vote against on this basis alone, that the fact that that window is overlooking a private garden of a separate property, and, you know, we wouldn't have allowed that anywhere else. So that's my view. I'm just wondering what the official position on that would be. I mean, I think it's against the design guide. I think there's certain mentions in the design guide about it, but I'm just interested to know what the position is.
Where you've got communal amenity space, then obviously you've got the upper floor flats using it, and they can look directly into the ground floor flats. So, but where you've got this private amenity space that's fenced off, which you do see in maisonettes, and I've been in several maisonettes that have had that arrangement, it is standard for mutual overlooking between from the upper floor to the ground floor, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, members, I'm now going to take this to the vote. So could members please indicate whether they support application 203-514 with the change to the condition that we've already agreed upon? Could you please raise your hands? I think I counted 6 there, Callum.
7, Chairman.
7. All right. So 7. Could you please lower your hands? And any member wishing to abstain, which I think we know already is because he's not participating, is Andrew, who's actually not formally participating in the decision. And finally, members who wish to object or refuse this application, could they please raise their hand? And I see Carl and 2 others. So that's that. The maths totals that 7 people are indicating approval, 3 people are refusing it. So therefore, that application is carried. Thank you, members. We now come on to the last item on this evening's agenda. Just when I get to the right page. In 33 Cottesmore Road, Woodley, application 210022. And we have speakers for this as well. So firstly, could we hear from Mark Croucher? I believe you're handling this particular application on behalf of the case officer.
That's correct, Chairman. Yes, I'll just show my screen for a quick presentation. Okay, hopefully members can see that. Yep. Yeah, the application is for a first floor side extension, a single story and 2-story rear extension, and also a garage conversion to the existing property. You can see the application site outlined in red there. And it should be noted that whilst it may look like a terrace sort of on the plans, you'll see that there's sort of linked single story elements. So it's not just a continuous 2-story built form. And this is the site plan just showing the extent of the development. The reason the red line is drawn like that is because the first floor side extension is set off the boundary by a metre, and then you can see the extent of the rear extension there, and also the extent of the remaining garden, which is also addressed in the officer report. Moving on to an aerial photo just to show the context of the site a bit more. So this is the application site here where the cursor is. So the extension will go above this, partially above this existing garage here, and then project out to the rear here, and then you've got the garden there. This is the some photos of the existing property. You'll notice from this as well that the front garden has already been hard surfaced, so there is space for 2 cars, and that's sort of addressed in the report, and also one of the conditions, or 2 of the conditions as well, actually. And the first floor side extension will just go here where the cursor is, and again there'll be a metre gap from the boundary at first floor. This is looking at the rear boundary to the properties it backs onto. And this is just looking at the back of the site and one of the neighbouring properties there, just to show the relationship. And again, this is the relationship with the other neighbouring property, and you can see the single-storey elements linking there, which are our garages at the moment. This is just for the existing elevations for clarity and the existing floor plans. So these are the proposed elevations. If we start with the one in the top left, you can see the first floor side extension there, matching roof pitch, eaves height, windows and materials. And you can also see that the garage door will be removed and replaced with a window and brickwork. Moving on to the bottom left, you can see the two-storey rear extension moved away from the boundary by 1 metre, and then you can see the single-storey element to it just there. And just for clarity, these are the floor plans. So at first floor, you get an extra bedroom and a bathroom and some additional accommodation. And it's just a kitchen, diner and bathroom as well on the ground floor. And you can see the free parking spaces demonstrated to the front there. I've shown this because members may note from the report that this was actually amended plans were submitted to mitigate some issues raised. So originally the application was submitted with this, with the first floor going right up to the boundary. And one of the requirements we asked for was to push that in by 1 metre to so it wasn't so dominating on the boundary, which is what they've done. So just to quickly sort of between them so you can see them moving it away from the boundary. And again, I'll just show you the floor plan as well. So this is the originally submitted floor plan. And if you sort of keep an eye on this bit, you'll see it. The first floor shifted off the boundary by 1 metre. So to conclude, Chairman, as set out in the officer's report, it is not considered there's any detrimental impact on neighbouring properties. It meets the borough design guide in terms of its rear projection and overshadowing. And as you've seen from the site photos as well, there's also existing hard surfacing to accommodate 3 cars as well. So the application is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the officer's report. And I'll hand back the screen now.
Thank you, Mark. Right, we now come on to the 2 registered speakers. And firstly, could I call Councillor Jenny Cheng, speaking on behalf of Woodley Town Council. Good evening, Jenny.
Good evening, Chairman. Thank you. When Woodley Town Council Planning Committee first saw a planning application for this large extension, our first reaction was that it was huge. We thought that it would change the street scene considerably, as it would make 33 Cottesmore Road look very different from the other houses. Cottesmore Road is a stable road, and any extension visible from the front would be an obvious change. In the first version of this application, both the first and second stories went right up to the boundary, and this gave an overpowering look to the front of the property. In addition, we felt that it produced a terracing effect. Although this second application, which reduces the width of the extension on the first story, is an improvement on the first, we felt this was not enough to mitigate the problems caused by the extension. There will be 5 bedrooms in the extended house, and we felt that there was insufficient parking provision. Not only is it insufficient, but it's going to be impossible for 3 cars to come off the road onto this area to park there at the same time, as there is a wall in the way and demolition of this is not part of the planning application. We also felt that the proposed rear extension is bound to cause problems with light to both next door neighbours. Woodley Town Council hopes that in the light of these objections, you will see fit to reject this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now call resident Barry Morfett, who's speaking on behalf of one of the property's neighbours who's objecting. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The councillor has stolen my thunder on the original remarks, but I'm speaking on behalf of Mrs. Jane Plank, who lives at 31 Cottesmore Road and has done so for 25 years or more. She wishes to continue to support the reasons for refusal as submitted by the Town Council and others, but she would also like to elaborate on a reason for refusal that she identified previously, which is far more personal to her. The issue is the loss of light, not only to her first floor landing window, as shown in the photographs that she submitted, but primarily in her back garden. There will be severely limited, if any, natural light to the aforementioned window as a result of the side extension being built, meaning that an indoor house light will have to be switched on at all times during the day if the stairs or landing are to be used in a safe fashion. This is not the case at present. The lack of natural light to the back garden due to the presence of a side extension is perhaps even more serious. When the properties were first constructed, they were designed and built to ensure that those with north-facing back gardens would always have significant natural light in those areas. Mrs. Plank is a keen and talented gardener, and for over a quarter of a century, she has spent vast amounts of time working in her back garden to develop flowers, plants and shrubs. I'm sure that councillors will be aware that photosynthesis is essential to plant growth and that the process is promoted by natural light. Both the original and the revised proposals acknowledge that the side extension would result in a reduction of light to Mrs. Plank's back garden. The Borough Council's own planning guidelines list the loss of light as a valid reason for refusing a planning application. Mrs. Plank would contend that the proposed side extension, albeit reduced in width, would ruin what she has worked for over 25 years and prevent any future growth of flowers, plants and shrubs. She would ask the committee to either refuse the application or at the very least to restrict that element referring to the side extension alongside her property to ground floor only. Other concerns, including overdevelopment, terracing and adequacy of on-site parking, remain. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, members, before we come on to speakers, I would just like to ask the officers to get some clarity on a couple of points on this, because we've heard a number of issues raised. Could we firstly confirm whether the proposed parking arrangements meet our parking standards straightforwardly?
Roger here. Yeah, they do, yeah. And we've asked for an extended drop crossing. So the wall won't be there, and the parking will be able to go to each independent parking space without having to move other cars.
Okay, so the direct entry from the road for all three parking spaces.
Yeah.
With the proposed loss of the wall, low wall and the drop curb that's extended.
Yeah, extended drop curb, yeah.
Just to add to that, Chairman, sorry, just as I advised, the hard surfacing is in situ, so the hard surfacing is already there. And also the other point I'd make is that there's no requirement for Planning Commission to remove the wall, so that's something they could do now, and it's not part of the consideration here.
I understood that. Okay. The second point is the issue that has been raised about light and loss of light. Could we get absolute clarity on the impact of the proposed side extension, firstly on the property, and I think there was a reference to an upstairs landing window. Could we cover that first, please?
Yes. So I think Mrs. Plank's at number 31, which is the property as you're looking at the map to the left. So the officer involved has done the 45-degree test where you draw a 45-degree line vertically and horizontally, which is recommended in the BRE guidance, and that doesn't breach any habitable room windows in his view. And as you're aware, the two-storey element is moved away from the boundary by a metre, so the bit on the boundary would just be the single-storey extension. And the other point to make as well is that from the existing neighbouring garage, which I showed a picture of where it adjoins, the proposed extension would extend approximately 2.2 meters beyond that, so fairly modestly. So the extension as a whole would extend 3 meters from the property, but where the neighbouring property is shifted slightly forward, or that garage is, the projection would only be about 2.2 meters from that. So overall, it's considered acceptable, and it meets the various tests in our borough design guide.
Okay, I'd just like to get real clarity on the issue about the impact on the upstairs landing window. You said that it meets the required standard for habitable rooms. Could we just get clarification as to whether a upstairs landing window is considered to be serving a habitable room?
Yes, Chairman, it wouldn't be a habitable room, a landing window, no.
It would or wouldn't?
It wouldn't be for a landing.
Okay, so presumably by implication, there could be significant shadowing there beyond the guideline, and that is acceptable, you're saying, because it's not a habitable room?
Well, I think there's two things. I don't exactly know where the landing window is that they're referring to. If, for example, it's in the side elevation and it faces the application site, then what we would draw is a 25-degree line from that window to see if the extension would clip that. I don't think that would be the case for this extension, and as you can see, it's pretty much in the side profile of the house. And you are quite right. For a landing room window, we'd be less concerned about loss of light than, say, a sole principal window to a bedroom. It's not to say that it's just not a consideration, but it wouldn't be as a concern as a habitable room window. You're dead right.
Okay, and what about the impact on garden space, the element of shadowing on garden space? Because most of the issues regarding shadowing relate to the property itself. How does this apply when it comes to the private amenity space, which obviously the resident has spent a lot of time caring for? I appreciate that the same standard is applied whether the back garden's a bomb site or whether it's pristine, but could you just clarify that?
Yeah, so the extensions to the east, so there potentially would be a loss of light in morning hours, but as the sun goes throughout the day, then it wouldn't be from sort of 12 o'clock onwards. There would be no loss of light. And the other point I'd mention as well is that it extends out approximately 2.2 meters from their single-story element, and that is a fairly modest projection. Generally in BRE guidance, what it recommends is that at least half the garden should be within light during the equinox days, which is in March and October, I think. And looking at this extension, it would be well within that. I mean, there would be potentially some overshadowing in winter months and perhaps in early mornings, but in terms of tracing the sun throughout the day, that wouldn't be detrimental in our view.
And finally, before we let others come on to this, would it be fair to say that 33 Cottesmore Road could use the current prevailing permitted development rights to build a single-storey rear extension considerably greater than the 2.2 metres proposed?
They could potentially do it under prior approval, but permission-wise, they could go 3 metres, which would be the same as it is now. So if you think of the impact on the other neighbouring property, essentially there'd be no difference as if they were doing an extension on the permitted development. And I note the single story area is actually quite modest in height for single story. It's where it's got a flat roof, it's 2.17 meters in height, which is, like I say, is generally quite good actually. Usually you sort of get them close to 3, well over 3 and close to 4 even. So it's fairly modest as a single story structure. Well, the single story bit is, yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, who wishes to speak on this application?
Let me just see the order, Chairman. There's not too many hands up at the moment. We have Gary Cowan and then Angus Ross.
Okay, fine. Oh, go ahead, please, Gary.
My hand is up by mistake.
Okay, thank you. Angus, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the questions about the light have been answered. I'm just looking on my screen at Google Earth of the site, and I believe that maybe the frontage has been cleared. There was some vegetation along the front there before, and I notice, in contrast to the previous application, there's no landscape requirement in this. Could the officer comment, please?
Good point.
Yeah, I noticed that from Google as well, that it does actually show landscaping being removed. That has been done, and would have been PD. To the front of the property, there's an ACO drainage system, the sort of grills. So that would mean that any hard surfacing they've done would meet PD requirements. And also, where it's block paving, they could have used soft sand or sand in between it, which would have made it porous. So it's very likely that that's lawful. And sorry, Angus, I forgot the second part of your question.
Well, it was whether there shouldn't have been some sort of landscaping condition or some requirement there.
Yeah. But unfortunately, where it's in situ, and it's lawful, there's nothing we can do. And as I said to the chairman, they could take the front wall out tomorrow without permission. It doesn't need permission to do that, unfortunately. The other point I probably would make as well is that some of the other properties in the streets in very close to this have very similar front gardens where they have paved over the entirety of it and removed sort of the wall more or less completely. And also, just one more thing, Chairman, I'd actually bring up now as I'm sort of on it, is there are a couple of other properties in the street scene in close proximity, number 23 and number 17, which do actually have first floor extensions going right out onto the boundary. So it's not as if this would be, first floor side extension would be completely alien. And I think there's a couple of others which have sort of gone further than our general guidance as well. So I do believe that that's not really a valid point in this case, unfortunately.
I suppose at least it's a positive step that they've introduced a step down or step back from the boundary to create a subservient extension to the main house, which is quite important on terraced or semi-detached properties. Okay, thank you. Malcolm, I see you're indicating to speak.
Yes, it's a fairly simple question. I don't know if you can do it on top of his head. It looks like quite a decent sized expansion, obviously, because it's ground and first floor and so on, especially when you look at it on Google Earth and so on. What sort of percentage expansion is it? There's a guideline, isn't there? Is it something like 30% of original volume of house or something? Does that not apply anymore?
That's the rate. 35%, I think, is the rate in Greenbelt.
Okay,
I think,
it doesn't have a similar thing
no,
here.
this is sort of fairly high density residential area, so doesn't have the same afforded protection in terms of density. Are you able to just confirm that, Mark?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. There's also something in our borough design guide which mentions about 50% to properties which are not in the Greenbelt but are in rural areas in the countryside. But this is neither, so there's no percentage increase. It's just purely on the merits of how it impacts neighbours and how it looks.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Callum, I don't see anybody else indicating to speak. Is that correct?
Neither do I, Chairman, no.
Okay, right. In that case, I'm proposing to put this to the vote. Members, we've had a discussion on 33 Cottesmore Road. Could you please indicate whether you're prepared to support planning application 210022 by raising your electronic hand? Thank you. How's that looking, Callum?
I'm seeing 10, Chairman. Just seeing who we're missing. I believe everyone. Oh no, we have 11 now, I believe.
11. Okay. So planning application 210022 is approved, and there's no need to take a vote on any others because everybody has voted. That brings us to the end of the main part of the agenda. And I would just like to cover two other points. The first one is you will have seen as part of your members' update that the council is continuing to maintain a phenomenal record in terms of appeals. Practically every appeal decision that's been coming through over the last 4 or 5 months has been supported. The council's position has been supported by the planning inspectorate, which broadly means I think it will be explained as the council has a control over planning that is acknowledged and supported by the planning inspectorate. Of course, that is also recognising that we can demonstrate at this point in time a 5-year land supply, which certainly helps oppose inappropriate new applications coming in certain areas. So that's the point I wanted to cover. I think that's the conclusion of that. I would like to end the meeting at this stage, but I would the formal part of the meeting. But I would ask members to stay on because there's another matter we need to just briefly discuss. So could the formal recording of the meeting end, please, Callum?